Welcome back to our study of the book of Exodus for the spring semester of 2026. I want to cover not just one passage, but several passages within the book of Exodus concerning miracles. With the possible exception to the book of Revelation, Exodus has more miracles in it than any other book in the Bible. We don't tend to think of it as a miraculous book, but remember, there were basically three stages where miracles took place in the Bible. One with Moses and Joshua, then later on with Elijah and Elisha, and then later on with Jesus and the disciples. So, not that God did not work miracles in the other time periods, He definitely did, but there seems to be more abundant miracles in these three different areas. Again, Moses and Joshua, Elijah and Elisha, and Jesus and the disciples. And so when we get to the book of Exodus here, not counting the 10 plagues, because of course each one of those is a miracle in and of itself, there are at least 18 other miracles that took place in the book of Exodus. Now, I say 18, but we divide those 18 out and find that there's actually two different categories of these miracles. There's 15 miracles that God performed, and then 3 that are demonic or satanic. When we'll look at that as well as the understanding that there can be miracles in this world to take place that God did not have a part of, that Satan had his hand in. God granted him limited powers in this world. Remember, he is the so-called God of this world, little g, not capital G, not a true God, but he hopes to be God and wants to be God, and will fail in that as he has in the past and is currently, and in the future will continue to fail in that. So we'll see at least 18 supernatural acts that are performed here in the book of Exodus. And remember, this is a transitional time for the children of Israel. They are going from being slaves to becoming a nation, held captive in Egypt for 400 years, had been separated in the land, and they were in the land of Goshen. Today would be close to Libya, up in that area, as what most Bible scholars will agree. That would be the land of Goshen. Not too far away from the rest of Egypt, but far enough away to where actually God allowed that to happen, to keep them separated from the Egyptians, separated from the ways of the world. But unfortunately, they lived in extreme poverty. They didn't earn wages for all the labors that they put in. And that's one of the reasons why, and we could actually add another miracle to this, if you would, that when they came out of Egypt, they were given wealth by the Egyptians. The word borrowed is used, and we limit that word borrowed today to mean that you'll pay it back. And of course, these were not goods that they would pay back, but rather that they were given by the Egyptians when they left, which was a fulfillment of a prophecy in Genesis chapter 15 that God told Abraham that they would go into a land, and when they'd come out they would have a certain amount of wealth. And so we could add that to this list of miracles, but I'm looking at miracles here that were given to make Israel aware of the presence of God and the worship that they needed to give God to thank Him for all the things that they've done. And so we'll look at 15 divine miracles that God worked in Moses' life and in the children of Israel's life. Moses had several performed just for him, and then others were performed for all of Israel. And the first one of these is the burning bush, the calling of Moses. This is, of course, after he came out of Egypt, went to the house of Jethro, the Midianites. Remember, the Midianites were descendants of Abraham through Keturah, his last wife. And so in Exodus 3:2, it says, "And the angel of the Lord appeared unto him in a flame of fire out of the midst of a bush. And he looked, and behold, the bush burned with fire, and the bush was not consumed." Now, of course, this was to indicate a message given to Moses to call him into the ministry of going into Egypt and letting the people leave Egypt. Exodus 3:5, he said, "Draw not nigh hither, put off thy shoes from off thy feet, for the place wherein thou standest is holy ground." When we find these phrases to put off your shoes, indicating holy ground, we see that's the presence of God. You go to the book of Joshua, when Joshua was confronted by the Lord of the captain of hosts, the place was holy ground. He put off his shoes there, indicating that captain of the Lord of hosts was nothing else but a Christophany, a pre-Bethlehem appearance of Jesus Christ. And then in Exodus 3:14, I included this verse here because this is the importance here of the calling. God said unto Moses, when Moses said, "Well, who shall I say sent me?" One will tell the people when they get down there, "Why will they believe me?" And God told him to say, "I am that I am." And he said, thus shalt thou say unto children of Israel, "I am has sent me unto you." I am that I am is the self-existent one. He is the only God. Remember, Egypt had thousands of gods, as many gods as they had different needs for. If a woman wanted to be pregnant, she prayed to one god. If they wanted crops, they prayed to a different god. If they wanted healing, they prayed to another one. Whatever it might be, they would have to pray to all these different gods. And I'm sure that had to be completely confusing to the Egyptians because they would have to find out which god did they pray to in order to call upon whatever god that they were looking for. I mean, it was ridiculous because, first of all the prayers that they prayed to these gods all went unanswered because there is no other God than God. And so God here reminds Moses that he is the only God, and by proclaiming I am that I am the self-existent one. The name of God, Yahweh or Jehovah, the way we translate today, it seems like I could be wrong, but it's like over 6,000 times in the Bible, 6,700 times, something like that, in the Bible. Translated in the King James oftentimes with capital L, capital O, capital R, capital D. And when you see that, of course, in the King James, that's a reference to Jehovah. And sometimes capital G, capital O, capital D is Jehovah as well. So anytime in the Bible you see all capital letters in the name Lord or the name God, that of course is a reference in using the Hebrew word Yahweh, what we call the tetragrammaton, 4 letters to indicate the name of God. And then later on they added vowels to that, YW, HW, and we came up with the name Jehovah, which is fine. We don't know the original pronunciation of the word Yahweh. It was not given to us. And of course, J's didn't come around until, for popular use, the letter J didn't come around until the 1700s AD. And so, obviously before that, the name of Jehovah may have been pronounced Yahweh or Yehovah, what have you. We just don't have that original pronunciation, and we don't need it. God knows who He is, and He knows that we don't have His original name. One day we will know what His original name was, not in this world, but when we get to heaven. We'll understand truly who God is and was and forever will be. But at this time, before they knew him as God, as Elohim, another name for a God in the Old Testament. El is singular, him is plural. Now that sounds like multiple gods, but actually it's not. It's a singular God, but it indicates the Trinity. H-I-M on the end of a word, just like or I am, like in cherubim or seraphim. I am indicates plurality. Well, Elohim indicates plurality, but not that there's three gods, but rather the Trinity. And so God gave us that name for him as well. So here Moses here is told, they tell them that the self-existent one, the only God that is and has ever been. And I don't understand eternality past. I don't understand it in any way whatsoever. It's obvious that it has to be, because if eternity past hasn't always been, then it had to have a beginning, and if it had a beginning, how did that beginning get started? And that blows your mind as well. If you really want to lose your mind, just dwell upon eternal life in the past. Now, I think it's easier for us to understand in the future that we will always be. However, that's far beyond our reasoning as well. I mean, we live on this earth for a very short period of time, of 67 years old. And this is the only life that I know. And it seems like it's been a fairly long time. But the reality of it is, this is not even a second when it comes to eternity. So our life with God forever is going to be absolutely amazing. But he is a self-existent one. He's the one who created us, and he is the one who will sustain us throughout all eternity. So Moses here is called to go into Egypt, and God gives him this sign of the burning bush. The second, third, fourth, and fifth miracles that we see in the book of Exodus all occur in chapter 4, verses 1 through 3. And Moses answered and said, "But behold, they will not believe me, nor hearken unto my voice. For they will say, the Lord hath not appeared unto thee. And the Lord said to him, What is at thine hand? And he said, A rod. And he said, Cast it on the ground. And he cast it on the ground, and it became a serpent. And Moses fled before it." So here's these signs given to assure Moses of his calling. This is all brand new for Moses. I mean, he was raised as an Egyptian, probably raised in his Jewish home till 5, 6 years old. We don't know how long it was that he was, but they say typically that the age of weaning a child was around 5 years old at that time. And so Moses lived with his Jewish parents for the first 5 years of his life and knew who he was. Some of these movies that are out, the Ten Commandments, a couple of different versions of that, kind of indicate that. I saw one of them where Moses' family told Pharaoh's daughter to promise that when he gets of age that they'll tell him who his real parents were. But I believe he knew who his real parents were. He knew that he was a Hebrew, but raised as an Egyptian, and probably liked it, enjoyed that part of his life. But now, after age of 40, after he ended up murdering an Egyptian, hid the body, was caught, and forced to flee Egypt, he then, later on, throughout, of course, meets his wife, Zipporah, and Jethro, his father-in-law. And now, when it's time for God to have Moses, now at the age of 80, Moses is called to go back into Egypt and let the people go. Remember, he lived to be 120 years old. The first 40 spent in Egypt, second 40 in Midian, and then the last 40 was the wilderness journey itself. And so he needed assurance of, you know, are the people going to believe me? And that's a reasonable question to ask God. Nothing wrong with us asking God questions. Is everything wrong with us questioning God? Us doubting Him, that's wrong to do. But asking God questions is the appropriate thing to do. And so he asked that, and God said, well, I'll take the rod and I'll make a serpent out of it. And so much so that Moses ended up fleeing from before it. I mean, it scared him. Then verse 4, and the Lord said to Moses, put forth thine hand and take it by the tail. And he put forth his hand and caught it, and it became a rod in his hand. I've heard, I had a professor in college who said that there were certain types of snake in Egypt, that we don't have them here, that when you grab that snake in Egypt, that it, for self-protection, it freezes and hardens out so you can actually pick it up and tail like a staff. And was said this is possibly what this was. No, it wasn't. This was a snake, not only a snake, but more than likely a poisonous snake, because Moses fled from before it. Moses would have been aware of what snakes look like. Like I say, he was near 80 years old, or 80 years old at the time. So, no, this wasn't a snake that hardened itself to become like a staff. It was a snake, and God would have him take it by the hand, and he put forth his hand, caught it, and became a rod in his hand. It didn't say that it became hardened like a rod. It says a rod in his hand. And then verse 6 and 7, the Lord said furthermore to him, put now thine hand into thy bosom. And he put his hand in his bosom, and when he took it out, behold, his hand was leprous as snow. Now I'm sure that had to scare Moses, because in those days there was no cure for leprosy, and a very scary thing, although the law had not been given at this point, and so the rules of leprosy had not been applied, but the facts of leprosy had been, and it was, people knew that once a person had leprosy, that was it. So when Moses put forth his hand into his shirt, into his bosom, he took it out, or his robe, took it out, and behold, his hand was leprous as snow. And he said, put thine hand in thy bosom again. And he put his hand into his bosom again and plucked it out of his bosom. Behold, it was turned again as his other flesh. Sure, that was quite a relief to Moses to realize here that, you know, he had been leprous and now he has been made clean. Again, these were signs to assure Moses of his calling. Moses had any doubts, and of course we know he was afraid to go in. He didn't know how to speak, he says, and maybe he didn't. Maybe he did have some type of speech impediment. We don't know. But we do know that when he got into Egypt, that God said that if Moses doesn't speak, then I'll let Aaron speak. And Aaron did make some speeches when they got into Egypt. But eventually we see that Moses became the chief speaker. So God gave him the ability that he needed to communicate to the people. So, matter of fact, if you want to add another miracle to the book of Exodus, there it is, that Moses had the ability to go in and speak to the people, even though he was scared to do that. Is that truly a miracle? Absolutely it is. For us today, I mean, I'm not the type of person that likes to get up in front of people and speak, and so if I do it, I know it has to be by the hand of God, because I don't have the talent to do that, the ability to do that, but I know that God can give me that ability, and God can take that away if need to be. And so it makes me aware of the fact that how much I need to thank Him for the ministry that He has given to me. Then in chapter 7, we see his staff turns into a serpent the second time. And Moses and Aaron went in unto Pharaoh, and they did so as the Lord had commanded. And Aaron cast down his rod before Pharaoh and before his servants, and it became a serpent. So here we begin to authenticate Moses' ministry in Egypt. for Moses and Aaron to be able to go to Pharaoh in the first place was pretty miraculous. I guess now we're adding even another miracle to this. Moses had to flee Egypt for 40 years, and he came back. I don't know what relationship Moses had with the new Pharaoh at this time. I don't know if that was one of the movies always portrays one of the kids he grew up with, one of his half brothers, something like that. It may very well have been. We don't know exactly, but the fact that he got an audience with this Pharaoh was pretty miraculous in and of itself. And so we see here this authenticated Moses' ministry in Egypt. Verse 12, and they cast down every man his rod, and they became serpents, but Aaron's rods swallowed up their rods. So again, if this was just a stick, or a snake that became hard as a stick, it just doesn't make any sense. But what does make sense is that God can do miracles, and if you don't believe that, then you'll never see a miracle. If you don't believe that, you're doubting God, you're doubting God's character, you're calling God a liar. And it's a very scary place to be. And of course there are a lot of people in this world that are in that very place today. But we see in 7:10 and 7:12, the serpent, staff becomes a serpent, and then the staff swallows up the Egyptian serpents. So great miracles here, again, to authenticate Moses and the ministry. And then very important miracles we find in the book of Exodus is the fiery and cloudy pillar that God gave to the children of Israel. I think it's what an amazing miracle it is. I have just one verse here, 13:21. And the Lord went before them by day in a pillar of cloud to lead them the way, by night a pillar of fire to give them light, to go by day and night. When children of Israel were stopped at the Red Sea, the text of the book of Exodus tells us that God put that pillar between them and the Egyptians. And that just really amazes me, because we don't tend to study that passage. We just look at it and we see the pillar that separated them. We think it's just this cloud separated them, a fog that separated between one nation and the other, the Hebrew children and the Egyptians. But remember, if you read the text, it says that there was darkness on one side and light on the other side. That's impossible, except for the power of God. I mean, we look, and if this room all of a sudden, these lights on this side went out and these lights stayed on, there would still be light in this room, because these lights would spread over. They say what lights, the speed of light's 186,000 miles per second. As soon as those lights went out, there would still be light. If all the lights went out, it would be darkness. If the sunlight went out as well. But light supersedes that. Light will infiltrate that. You can't have a point of darkness like that, except for the power of God. So in this cloud, if light travels 186,000 miles per second, God stopped the speed of light. Wouldn't it be so cool to see that? How that you had this light, and all of a sudden you had darkness. I mean, you step one place to the other, from light into darkness, just like that, and never leave a room. I mean, they didn't have to leave the ground, and it's just absolutely phenomenal, the miracles that God wrought for the children of Israel. And they had this witness to them. They could see this in their daily life. That it was a sign of God's guidance, and how that God would guide them every day by this pillar of cloud, and by night by the pillar of fire. And I always think, the Canaanites, they knew that Joshua, or Moses and the children of Israel, and Joshua as well, were coming up to get the land. They knew that. They didn't take them by surprise. When the children of Israel got to the Jordan River, the Canaanites already knew they were coming. The word had gotten out. And probably one of the obvious things for them, and we know that because in Joshua chapter 9 talks about the Gibeonites, and the Gibeonites tell them, we heard of you, we heard of Moses and y'all coming up here, we heard about your God. They had all this witness to that. Rahab, in the book of Joshua, became a believer. She knew of this power of the true living God. But remember, this pillar of fire every night was there at Israel. And then every day this cloud. All the Canaanites had to do was look south at nighttime, and they could see this pillar no matter where it was at. Remember, there was nothing to drown it out. There was no street lights or anything to make it so that it could not be seen. They had to be fully aware of this for 40 years, aware of the fact that the children of Israel were coming, giving them ample time to repent, ample time to turn to the true and living God, or even ample time to hit the road if they didn't want to believe. But they knew that it was coming. God gave them every opportunity to come to know Him. Number 9 here, the Red Sea crossing, in chapter 14. Again, sign of God's deliverance. Remember, the children of Israel, when they left Egypt, going up to the Promised Land, there was a path that they could have taken that, let's see if we can get this to show up on here. This is Israel today. Right here is Egypt. Right here is Egypt. Here, over here, actually way down to the bottom of this, is the Red Sea. I hope you can see this. But at the bottom of this map is the Red Sea. This is today Elat. You look on the map of Israel at Elat, you'll see the Red Sea right here. Well, here is Egypt. Down here is the Red Sea. The children of Israel could have left the land of Goshen, went out and came up on dry ground all the way into the land. That's not the path that God chose for them. God chose for them to go a little south, and then from south they would go east, and when they went east they would get to the Red Sea. And then the Red Sea here, at the very bottom of the map that I have here, goes on down and widens out considerably. So the children of Israel would have came across and crossed the Red Sea there. Meaning that there was an easier path for them to choose. But God did not want them to choose that path. What they would do is they crossed the Red Sea, and then today this is the modern country of Jordan. They would come up through the Edom, they would come up through Moab, they'd come up, well, Jordan is the Ammonites, Ammon, Jordan, and they would come up this way, and then cross over about right here. Jericho's right here. The Jordan River's right here. This is the Dead Sea. So they come all the way up and come in this way. Why? Because God wanted them to form themselves as a nation. They had to take time. Remember, the first 18 months, they were completely doing what God wanted them to do in the world's turning. If they wanted to, they could have been in a month or so, or even quicker. But God wanted them to wait to form themselves as a nation, to get organized, to form their armies, to form everything, get the people divided out into the right tribes. Everything had to take place during this time. And then after 18 months, they were to go into the Promised Land. Of course, we know that they didn't believe God, and God extended to a total of 40 years they spent. But why did God not take them up the easier path? Because God had a plan for them, to learn to trust Him, to learn to obey Him, and all that they did. So the Red Sea crossing was to show them that God can deliver them, that God can get them in, no matter what obstacle they face in life, that God can get them through it. I always think of the Red Sea, that God could have taken them around it. God could have taken them over it. I mean, He had just lifted up the whole nation of Israel and picked them up and dropped them down on the other side. God could have taken them under it. He could have built a tunnel under it for them to go through. But He didn't choose to do that. He chose to take them through it. Our life is the same thing. There's a lot of times God can deliver us from every obstacle we're facing. And sometimes He may very well do that. He may get rid of the problems that we're facing. But more often than not, He takes us through them. Why? So that we can learn every day more and more to trust Him, to do what He would have us to do, and to believe Him, to have more assurance of our faith and trust in God, so that when other obstacles come in our way down the road, they're much easier to face, because we know, hey, He brought us through the Red Sea, surely He can bring us through other things as well. Our life the same way. We may not went through the Red Sea as such, but we went through problems in the past that has given us strength so that we can serve Him better and do the things that are pleasing unto Him. Then, number 10, the waters at Marah, and this is one of those amazing miracles in the Bible that God performed, but it's a wonder that He did. Chapter 14, they came through the Red Sea. They celebrated after they came through the Red Sea, after the waters went back and killed the Egyptians, Pharaoh and his army, his chariots, his horses. They saw God's protection, God's deliverance. And then as soon as they come up with some water that's bitter, they cry out. And thinking it'd be better for us to have died in Egypt than it would be to go any further. Man, how quickly we turn from God and do those things that are not pleasing to God. So here's a sign of God's provision. And he cried to the Lord, and the Lord showed him a tree. This is Moses here, which when he cast into the waters were made sweet. There he made for them a statute and an ordinance, and there he proved them. So God proved to them that He's going to take care of them, that no matter what they face. See, they were going into the land not because they were good people, because remember, most of them ended up not going into the land. All those 20 years old and above who came out of Egypt died in the wilderness journey because of their failure to trust the Lord. But God was taking them to the land because He said He was going to take them into the land. Not because they were good people, but because God said so. And when we trust God, God will deliver us. When we face the bitter waters, we need to accept that rather than to cry out and think, okay, God, you failed me again, when He has not failed them. In spite of who we are, God still takes care of us. All right, we'll talk more about these miracles next time.